want to get published as an author-illustrator. Will a mentorship help? Which is better, self-publishing or traditional publishing? Is my picture book dummy actually ready to send out?
So you're never going to be ready, and I think that's a mistake a lot of illustrators make.
In today's two-part episode, I ask those questions to two heavy-hitting illustrators. I sit down with Eisner Award-winning illustrator Janet Lee and creator of the popular Illustration Department podcast and Substack author Giuseppe Castellano. He also happens to be my mentor. We talk shop about how to create a picture book, how to persevere and maintain confidence through inevitable rejection, and whether or not one is truly ever ready. Okay. I'm excited to share this with you because if you are ever considering doing a mentorship, hopefully this will give you good insight on what that is like.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going? I'm shaking.
Oh, I used to shake.
Oh.
I used to shake when I used to do talks at conferences and things.
Oh, gosh.
Oh my gosh. The first handful of years, every single time I was, minutes away from standing in front of a bunch of people and talking to them about something that I knew a lot about.
Yeah.
I'd get this sort of like performance anxiety, mini panic attack. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. And you can even hear it in your voice. Sometimes like when you're talking, you can kind of hear the
glottal or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, hey, that's a word. All right. I have your stuff right here.
Awesome.
Pulling it up. So you know the drill. We're going to look through what you've sent over and see what we can see here. Already I'm noticing it seems like those two pieces anyway, you're testing out some new material.
I'm trying to play with different brushes. So those brush packs you told me about, the True Grit and Max packs.
Where do you find the time to draw as much as you draw? Well, this is a lot. I don't know. I mean, you wouldn't know this, but I see this, 5, 6, I meet with 5 or 6, 7 illustrators a day. So the assignments aren't exactly the same, but the assignment is draw something, paint something, and let's see it. And often I'll get a handful of drawings. Most people will do, 5 or 6 drawings of a certain assignment, or, a piece, or maybe 2 of a certain finalize this piece kind of an assignment. But you tend to give me a heck of a lot more drawings than pretty much everybody else that I mentor.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, okay. But do you notice that they're not finished? I bet they give you finished art.
Sometimes. Yeah. Most of the time. Sure. Not always. A
lot of these are just little pockets. So that's why I send you just, I think you've called these reps before, to where it is just doing things here and there when I can. A lot of times it's after I put the kids to bed, and I just that's sort of my winding down before I fall asleep. I'm just sketching, hanging out with my husband and watching a TV show, sketching. Those things I have more time to do, I feel like, in little pockets.
Which the finished part will eventually take care of itself. It really will. I mean, what we're talking about here, and the drawing part is obviously the most important part. It starts with drawing. How do you design the thing you're designing? How are you drawing? How are you using your marks, whatever materials you're using to convey something, whether it's a funky looking character like this character, which I love, or a person, or, the sort of sapling of a children's book character that you're going to end up developing into a book at some point. This is important. These are reps. And as anyone who knows way more about bodybuilding than I do, you have to keep going at it. You're not going to see the results unless if you're sporadic about it, or you get to you do a week full of drawing and then 2 weeks of nothing. I mean, you have to be consistent as well. And so that's the thing that I find most impressive about you. Believe it or not, this may not feel this way, but
oh wow,
you know how hard it is, especially if you have kids and you put the kids to bed. I mean, after putting the kids to bed, you're like, that act saps some energy because you're getting a little cozy and sleepy and whatever. And then you're like starting another kind of day after that by sitting down and drawing. So many illustrators really have a tough time with that. I have a tough time with that. I have a really tough time being creative or writing anything or thinking creatively at all after, 7:30.
I think that's why I'm doing this, because it's very therapeutic. It is not something that I think I just can't handle this right now. It's like, I need to do this right now.
You're being obsessive.
Yeah.
I'm using that word in like the most positive way possible.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that I've gathered also from this mentorship is that it's important to do, I asked you about this early on as far as putting 1,000 or 10,000 hours in. You're like, wait a minute. It's not necessarily putting 10,000 hours in. It's also working smart. So not necessarily just drawing whatever. I've learned it's important to draw from reference. And so some of these pages that I'm sending you are loose references of like a cartoon caricature book that I have on my bedside. But I also have learned through this is that do some studies, which I need to do more of. But that is another way to improve.
Who was I talking to? The Bancroft brothers.
Oh, yeah.
I recorded a conversation with them.
Awesome.
Yeah, it'll come out soon. I was talking to them about character design and what they think about when they think about character design. And I don't remember if it was Tom or Tony who said when they're teaching students about character design, often what they'll see is that the kids will default to these like standard basic poses that they've seen before, even if they don't intentionally go like trying to copy a pose that they've seen someone else do. There are like some built-in pretty cliche poses.
I do the hands on the hips a lot. That's very comfortable for me. So
that's fine. Little sass, nothing wrong with a little sass. It's fine. By the way, I'm just, doing the thing I do.
Yes.
When marking the ones that I think are like, there's a lot to like about a lot of these drawings and just different stylizations and zaniness and
cool.
With a lot of these, there's a little R. Crumb feeling to them, a little like kind of raw and grungy.
Okay.
But still like with thick personalities with these characters. There's the Susan Pearl, which you and I talked about, where you are taking liberties with you're using your artistic license liberally and pushing and pulling their anatomy so that it, isn't just a standard, typical what illustrators will do. And they'll just kind of start with a circle and go, I'm done with my head shape, which, as you and I both know, that's just not how it should work.
So like we've talked a lot about shape language. I'm not saying I'm getting there, but like one thing that I was practicing on those characters is using the S curve and the C curve and that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can always simplify. I think, there's so many different approaches to teaching. I think breaking it down and deconstructing shapes into more simpler, that makes sense, simpler shapes is a good place to sort of like clean up some maybe bad habits or just kind of like more clearly and cleanly see what the character is supposed to look like. And then you can always build back up from there and get a little bit more like this character. There's a lot of moving parts to this character. There's a lot of twists and turns and concave shapes, convex shapes, lots to go, lots to see. But if you see
reference.
It as basic shapes, there's a reason. There's a reason why this is one of your better ones. You can see like that's a square. The body is like a little lima bean type of shape, or actually you can sort of see it as almost like a little bit of like a, I don't know, Halloween candy corn sort of shape. These basic shapes that you then, and then triangles, rectangles that you then can build off of on top of that. I mean, that's, I think, basic definition of what shape language is supposed to do is start there and then build off of it. This dog has sort of a Quentin Blake, oh gosh, who's the illustrator? I would never remember his name off the top of my head. The illustrator who did Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Oh, cool.
It'll come to me in a second. Or not, maybe not. That's old age talking right there. So, you're going more painterly in areas, you're going a bit more impressionistic in areas. Obviously, you're going more graphic and flat in some areas. Are you getting, hints or clues or whiffs? Ooh. In terms of like finishing a piece, does one, like, you're going more impressionist? I saw like a little bit more realistic. You had that like, here, this one here. This one feels a bit more on the, it's not realism, but you're more modeled, looser, pen and ink and watercolor style, more graphic. So it's 3, sort of in between. And then this is a looser, but cleaner, less fuss, pen and ink style. So any one of these directions are you, and then you're going with this like color pencil, pastel, very impressionistic.
So
do any of these, like, are any of these resonating?
Yes. The 2 monkeys, I really liked that flow working digitally and how it felt more traditional. And I looked at it after the fact and thought, I don't see a lot of noise in this. I like to use some noise when I'm digitally painting because I like to add textures and things, but I can see how it's another thing what we had discussed, like using a whole lot of different fonts and brushes that just creates distraction and confusion.
Right.
But I do like the pen and ink look, and I like that look.
I like this look a lot.
So
yeah, there's a couple of illustrators that you might want to, if you wanted to go down this route a little bit more. I think we've talked about Ludwig Bemelmans before, but just in case.
Is that Madeline? Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So this has that graphic and flat.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like there's that pig and that other animal, like graphic and flat with a pretty heavier line, more of an outline-y type of line. And then obviously you go way more painterly and impressionistic, suggesting what's going on in the background, not literally telling us. It feels like shrubbery and trees, not literally. He's not so concerned about like, I need to draw every leaf, but he gets us enough information for us to be like, yep, I know where they are. They're at the zoo. Lots of trees, lots of shrubs. I get it. Absolutely. And so he's cleaner in some spaces and then messier in other spaces.
1,000%. I really like that. So how do you have such a wide visual library of illustrators?
Obsessive. I mean,
okay.
Kind of. I'm obsessed. I love illustration. So there's that. But you hear mentors, teachers say this all the time, not just art teachers, but really any teacher. Like the more you teach a subject, the more you learn about it, and the clearer, yeah, but sure, clearer and more solidified that information becomes in your head. So it's just easy. The more I talk about it, the easier it is to talk about, basically. And for years now, I've spent basically every single week reading and writing about illustrators throughout history.
On your Substack?
Well, yeah, Substack. Yeah. It started with Instagram first, and then I moved it to Substack. So, these biographies, the more you read about them, the more connections get made. And then the more you teach about them, the easier it is to recall them. Mm-hmm. Plus, like it sometimes it can be easy. You can sort of see it in someone's work. It just sort of instantly gets to you. I mean, if you're into anything, if you're into music and you're listening to other people's music, you're like, oh, that sounds like,
right,
Miles Davis or Thelonious Monk or, whatever.
Yeah.
Another illustrator you might want to take a look at is, sometimes it's not so easy, is her name starts with an S.
Starts with an S. So swummy, slippy, slappy, slimming, simmon, Swanson.
Oh, she's British. It'll come to me.
That's been something else that I feel like has been valuable from this mentorship, is just getting almost like an education on these wonderful illustrators to look into as far as the style that I'm going for. Like you showed this picture of this Bimmelman piece, and I'm inspired. I want to go raid my daughter's bookshelf because she has some Madeline books. And I take that from our call sometimes, and I will just do a deep dive into these, like Margaret Boyd Graham and Susan Pearl.
Sure.
And it just opens up the door for me to think there's a possibility for me in this direction, because it's already sort of, there's seeds there, I guess, to grow off of.
Yeah, I was asked this one time years ago about why is it so important to study illustration history, and specifically children's book illustration history. And beyond just going like, oh, I now know who Margaret Boyd Graham is. It's more about like, history repeats itself, what we can learn from the past. And I find that as the more I learn about the not just who Wanda Gogg is, and her book was called something like Millions of Cats or Millions and Billions of Cats, in which, by the way, which this book was published about 100 years ago and it's still in print. It's about millions and billions of cats who basically murder each other for the affection of the farmer and his wife. They're like, I'm the favorite. No, I'm the favorite. And they all kill each other. And that book became a bestseller. It's still in print. Would that book get printed today? Probably not. Probably not. But I just love hearing about and learning about like, oh, this thing that we're going through right now, whether it's with like representation or, even just like money, getting a sense of like what it used to be like for children's book illustrators, not just in the 90s and 80s, 50s, the 30s, and comparing that to what's going on now just gives us a better sense of like, where are we? What is this true state of children's book illustration, or just illustration in general? So obviously the more you learn about the past, the clearer the future gets, I find. This illustrator is the name of her is escaping me, but I did remember the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas illustrator, and that's Ralph Steadman. Okay. So here's an example of Steadman's work. So you see what I'm saying? Yes. Like scratchy, watery.
Yes.
A little mixed media, a little pen and ink, a little color pencil, like these are the things that you can absolutely do with your work if you want to. There's a alligator piece, which we'll get to in a second, that you drew, which reminded me of Bernard Weber. Lyle Lyle Crocodile. Yes. He's most known for. Let me see if I can find. So there's this character, this book, which by the way, absolutely outstanding book. And this drawing reminds me of that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. The dangerous thing about looking at other people's work, not just people today, but from the past, is if you do it too much, then it becomes noise. And then you start thinking about like, well, what would so-and-so do in this situation? And that's not the first question you should be asking. You should learn from what they're doing and then ask yourself, what would I do in this situation? Now knowing what other folks have done and seeing what they've done opens up the range and opens up the possibilities for what I can do. I mean, that's the point of showing. That's what I always, try to remind illustrators. I'm not just showing this to you to like, make you feel bad. Like, look how great Maurice Sendak is and you're not. It's more like, what choices did they make? And look at the possibilities of whatever it is that you're doing. You have more possibilities than you think. Stylistically, compositionally, with medium, all of that. Storytelling. Often I get this question a lot when people write children's books and we look through their manuscripts and edit and stuff. Will kids like this? Is this marketable? They're thinking about outward, what is this how's this going to get, what's the reaction? What's the response? Valid questions, 100% valid questions. But they're asking these questions in replace of, is this thing that you're drawing or writing interesting to you first? Are you making decisions with it that you find, visually appealing or whatever? you should ask that question first. The answer is yes, then sure, you can then start going back to like, okay, well, how are people going to react to this?
Okay.
But if you're learning about what other people are doing, you will get more answers and clues into like, oh, I can actually go this way with my composition. I could use more negative space, like, and then fill in the blank illustrators, or I could be a minimalist, like these folks, like Charlie Harper. Mm-hmm. You know, it could be really flat and designy, or I could be a maximalist, like Jan Brett.
Okay.
And or like Kamiko Craft. You know, like just chock full of information. So it depends, man. And it's the more you learn about this stuff, the more you're just like, oh my gosh, look at all these possibilities.
So start from a place of authenticity and like, am I happy with this, or is this interesting to me? And then find the comps and like what has worked for other people. Yeah.
And I guarantee you the comps exist. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Okay.
And a debate in children's books currently is, well, where are you pulling these comps from?
Okay.
Some editors will say, or agents I've seen say on social media, you don't want to comp your book or compare your book to books older than 5 years.
I've heard that.
I don't agree.
And that, I really like the Bimmelman style and that like Clifford and that kind of vintage look. So then what do? You
pay attention to what's being published, because that's just a good idea. If you're in any business, you should pay attention to what your colleagues are doing. But you should also study what has happened, what has been published in the past. Here's what I find really curious about this. They'll say like, no, don't say that this is a cross between Where the Wild Things Are and, I don't know, Ferdinand, which is a weird mix. But because those books were published, 40 years ago, they're still in print.
Mm-hmm.
A. B. So in other words, they're still being purchased by the current, the market. And B, in the same breath, you'll hear these folks say, the publishing professionals, not many of them, but some will say, no, you can't, you have to source, books 5 years or newer.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
but then aren't you just copying?
Well, a little bit of that. Yeah. Like, well, sure, but we're like in a very specific era at the moment. Mm-hmm. And so are we just kind of regurgitating what's happening right now? And C, in the same breath, they'll say, gosh, my favorite book of all time is whatever.
Madeline.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's your favorite book, but we're not allowed to like study from Bellman's. That's weird.
Okay. So I think you're bringing up an important point, because as I've been trying to navigate and gather information and research on traditional publishing and the world of, putting yourself out there and sending pitches and stuff, at a certain point, my husband and I were having this conversation. He's like, you've got things in the can. He's like, why don't you just do it? Like, why don't you just, and then we talked about self-publishing and things. How do you know if it's worth just doing it, if you believe in something enough to put it out there and do it, versus when you should play the game, get to know people, learn the rules, follow the rules, keep up with the rules, and rules.
Rules. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I feel like the older I get, the more I just want things to be simpler and simpler and simpler.
Yeah.
So this just could be age talking. Okay. I don't think so. I think that we fuss and focus on the wrong things collectively as illustrators and people who want to get published. Is we're all focusing on the rules. Like one of my favorite rules is picture books can't be any longer than 500 words. Mm-hmm. What if it's like a epic fairy tale and you need 650 or 750 words to tell that story? What if your book, whatever book it is, needs a certain number of words, but then you're going to these conferences and you're hearing people say, children's books can't be in, between 250 and 500 words. And then some people will cite these days, kids don't have attention spans, so books have to be shorter. There's so many wrong things about all of that. One is it's first of all, these are all blanket statements. And as we all know, you don't want to make blanket statements because they're immediately wrong. One blanket statement is, books can't be. Well, shouldn't we be, as mentors, as publishing professionals, as teachers, like, shouldn't the folks who are like in positions to share insight saying what you can do and not what you can't? Mm-hmm. So that's always it's weird to me anytime I hear a piece of advice that limits creativity and not shows how expansive it can be. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, it's like, you have to, the market is showing this, or here are the rules, the books need to look like this, mm-hmm. or it's that, yeah. But there's so many exceptions. Publishing is so subjective. And if you're trying to chase a rule or a style or a trend, by the time you catch up to it, it's already gone. Mm-hmm. For example, books you see on the shelves today are the culmination of ideas, acquisitions, and work that occurred years ago. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at the rules, like, one rule is you go to the bookstore and see what's on the shelves and you'll get a better sense of what you should do. Mm-hmm. Well, what's on the bookshelves it's already obsolete. It's already 2 years old, mm-hmm. 3 years old or older. So I think it's like, to answer your question, I think it's a little bit of both. You want to embrace your own individuality and trust, which is, I know, it's a big word for a lot of illustrators, me too. Like, trust that we do know what we're doing, that the stories we want to tell are interesting, and that there will be folks out there who will agree with us. Trust that, and put together, like, focus on what you can control. Your own ideas, the way you visualize your ideas, what you write, what you draw, how you present those ideas, your website, your social media, whatever, and try to get as many people to be aware of your ideas as possible through promotion. That you can control. The rules are subjective. Mm-hmm. 99% of them are subjective. There are a couple of rules, like picture books should be 32 or 40 or 48 pages. There's a certain page count that you want to adhere to, and
standard sizes for
there's
book displays.
Stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But in terms of like, well, I haven't seen this type of book out there, therefore I shouldn't do it. No, if you haven't seen it, that's a very good sign that you should do it. Because first of all, just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. What you see in what you or any of us, any publishing professional sees on a day-to-day basis is incredibly limited. Mm-hmm. They don't see the whole scope. So like we can't speak about the market or publishing or how to get published in these like very limited definitions, because it's just not how it works.
But the reason to try to go the publishing route is because then you have like a reputable name behind what you're doing, and then you have distribution, you have marketing, you have representation,
right?
And
that is the
royalties.
Yes, that's the self-publishing versus traditional publishing. Yes. Self-publishing is like, I'm all for self-publishing, mm-hmm. and like, I will share this. Like, if you had asked me like 10 years ago about self-publishing, I would have been like, absolutely not.
Okay.
But these days, you can self-publish some really, really beautiful stuff. People do.
Was it kind of seen as like, oh, this wasn't good enough to be published on its own? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. But that's shifted, almost like how musicians can have a hit song on social media first.
Exactly. Yeah, it sort of was seen that way. And I got to say, I was wrong. And for my part, I was wrong in feeling like 15 years ago, self-publishing was like, well, you're self-publishing because you can get published.
Well, you could have been right back then, though.
Maybe. But the tools now, and there's just it's so much easier to self-publish these days. And by the way, self-publishing is not new. Mm-hmm. Beatrix Potter self-published.
I'm so glad you brought her up. You've written about her in your Substack before.
Well, she's my favorite illustrator.
She's awesome. I went to exhibit of hers at the Frist in Nashville a while back.
Nice.
They had and I think you've interviewed one of the curators for that on your
I interviewed,
podcast?
a couple of curators, about her. Mm-hmm.
So she dealt with a lot of rejection, right?
Big time.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So as a mentee, what do you tell your mentors about dealing with, or your mentees about dealing with rejection relating to Beatrix Potter?
Good Lord. That's another 3-hour long conversation. Rejection is going to happen. It sucks. There's no sugarcoating it. But let's use our words. Rejection is wrong. The word rejection is incorrect. It's inaccurate. Okay. They're not rejecting you.
Yeah.
They're just saying, thanks for sending this to me. It's not right for me.
Right.
And so if you're sending stuff to editors too, but if you're sending stuff to agents and whatever agency, and an agent says, this isn't right for me, unless the agency has a policy of like a no from one of us is a no from all of us, which by the way is ridiculous. But let's say they have that policy, then fine. But most don't. So one agent at the same agency could say, no, thank you, Brittany, it's not right for me. And then you send whatever you're sending to the next agent, one cubicle over or whatever. And that agent can be like, where have you been all my life? Mm-hmm. So it's subjective. So they're not rejecting you. They're just saying, I'm going to step aside and you will continue your journey and your search for agents. And the same goes with editors, and the same goes with art directors. Right. I did the math once and it kind of broke my brain a little bit, but I think over 20 years being conservative, saying like, okay, I received 5 to 15 or 5 to 20 emails and postcards every week for 270 days a year for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And it was something like 25 or 30,000 postcards or emails that I received from illustrators. Out of those 30,000, conservatively, it's probably more, but out of that, I probably could count on both hands and feet how many times I responded to an illustrator just to say, I got your postcard, I like it, and I'm going to keep it on file for future projects. Sure. There were another maybe a couple hands and feet where I would respond and say, perfect timing, we have a book for you. Yeah. But that's, 0.001%. Yeah. But does that mean that the 99.99% were rejected? No. Yes. Well, see what I'm saying? So like, it's not the right word.
So what I'm trying to get to is that Beatrix Potter level confidence in my work and my projects, to where when I get a rejection, I know it's because it's not the right thing, but it's somebody's right thing, as opposed to where I'm kind of at right now, which is it's not the right thing because you're not ready yet. Or it's not the right thing because you still have some learning to do. You still have some, things to study or research. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a balance in not being like too overly confident when there's still work to be done, but then also getting to that level where, kind of like you said, is it interesting to me first? Is it ready? Do I feel 1,000% that this needs to be out in the world? And then nobody can tell me no at that point. I want to get to that point. They can tell me no.
You'll never get to that point.
Yeah.
They still will. They still will.
Okay.
All the best, all the greats have been rejected.
Yeah.
Everybody. Literally everybody. Beatrix Potter, Norman Bridwell, every single person you can think of. Marie Sendak.
They'll tell me no, but I will not let that stop me, is what
exactly.
I mean.
Yeah, exactly. It's just sort of, again, it doesn't feel great. I've been rejected. And you just kind of have to go, okay. Yeah. Moving on. And it can sometimes, for some of us, it can take a minute or a day or a week or a month. You just have to, be mindful of your own mental and physical health and take care of yourself, because it can beat you up. It's a little bit of a gauntlet, 100%. Yeah. But you'll never be ready, by the way. No one's ever ready. Okay. Ever. Like when I put the podcast together, I waited and waited. The idea for the podcast came out in January of 2018. Mm-hmm. It didn't come out until July of 2019. 19.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't because I needed to like learn how do you record and how, all the stuff that you're doing, like how do you put this together and make sure your audio sounds right? No, it was because I didn't feel ready. And then one day I was just like, whatever. I'll just send it out, see what happens.
Yeah.
You just have to send it out and see what happens. So you're never going to be ready. And I think that's a mistake a lot of illustrators make, is saying, they've literally said to me, oh, I will when I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you should send this book out. I will when I'm ready. Your portfolio you should email your portfolio to art directors. I will when I'm ready.
Okay.
When is like, I don't think I've never, maybe people have had this experience. I haven't personally, and I've never spoken to anyone in 35 years have said in these exact words, I'm ready. I can now send my stuff out. I'm now ready. No one's ever said that. And I just don't think I don't think it's true. I don't think there's no finish line.
Okay.
Being a creative person isn't like a linear thing, like where you can see the goalpost and you go to the goalpost. It's not, it's ever moving, it's fluid, it's ebbs and flows, it's all sorts of things. So, illustration, I mean, the honest truth of it all is that illustration is a career full of failure. You'll email 100 art directors. You're not going to get 100 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one or two.
Mm-hmm.
At least one or two nice emails in return. There's a lot of like trial and error, more error than success, but the successes do come if you stay with it and focus on what you can control. And once those successes obviously are all the sweeter, because they were built on perseverance and a little obsession.
And mentorships.
And mentorships. I
right?
mean, exactly. When you think of it this way, with mentorships, actors have mentors.
Yes.
Musicians have mentors. Public speakers have mentors.
Mm-hmm.
People you see on TV, like Oprah. Sure, she has a mentor. Why shouldn't illustrators have mentors? They absolutely should.
Okay, here's an important question. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh, go ahead.
Anybody who's watching this or listening to this, considering a mentor, how do they find their mentor? How do they find the right mentor for their style, for the direction they're going in? What would you suggest?
Oh, man, that's a good question.
Other than signing up for the illustration department, of course.
Oh, yeah, I was going to drop a joke. That's an easy one. Yeah. Visit illustration department, illustrationdept.com.
But are there such thing as like bad mentorships, like where this is not maybe your fit, or you need to be further along in your career before you get this caliber of mentor?
Ooh, good questions. Okay, so separating that. So how far do you need to be in your career?
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you are.
Okay.
That's the answer.
All right.
Like, you don't have to wait. Like, oh, I need to, and that I've heard that before. Illustrators have emailed me and said, one day I'll sign up for a mentorship, but once I put together a portfolio, and I'll write back and say, okay, that's fine. Just letting you know, if you have work, you don't need a portfolio. We can start the mentorship with what you have. And often they sign up and they're like, oh yeah, okay. Are there bad mentors? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know if they're bad or good? You kind of don't. I mean, it takes a little bit of research. Hopefully, whoever you decide to go to might have like a testimonials page. Mm-hmm. We do, where you can see what your colleagues, that's the best way to gauge like if they're good or bad. It's just like, what have other people said about them? Mm-hmm. Obviously. Some mentors, some folks who offer a mentorship of some kind, like even just a 1 hour portfolio review, or maybe a couple of weeks of like chit chat over your portfolio or something. Hopefully they'll have something where it's like, here's the successes, here's what we've done with other folks, or something like that. So you're trying to find that. But if you can't find that, you sort of take the leap. And you do it enough times. I know it costs money. There may be one or two folks who you'll have a portfolio review with them, and they'll say some really harsh stuff about you, about your work. They'll literally say, you can't draw.
Okay.
There's one person in particular, which I will not name, who prides themselves on their
Tough.
No BS portfolio reviews, which I just think that's ridiculous. Like there's a way to like really dissect a portfolio without hurting someone's feelings.
And you have no style or sense of fashion?
Well, I think that depends on what you're...
No. That wasn't a question.
Okay.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like, it's a little trial and error too.
Awesome. So on that note, one thing that I've gotten out of this mentorship is, showing you my website, kind of navigating, like seeking to get representation and things. So I do have a pitch folder that I sent. For the remainder of our time, I was wondering if you would just give me a little review of whether or not you think it's a good foot to put forward.
Sure.
This one I've sent out and may or may not ever get a response. That's fine. I'm using Query Tracker to see who's open for submissions. I think it's a good resource. You've also said readz.com is also a good resource. So there's other ones out there. But
their websites, sometimes they'll say to submit to us, just here's our email address. It depends on the agent. You just have to obviously start with their website, and then they'll instruct as to where to go to submit to them. By the way, this is Shirley Hughes. This is the British illustrator that I couldn't remember her name. But notice like how scratchy.
I like the scratchy.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of like everything that you're doing with like pen and ink and looseness and watercolor and a little bit more like a more layered sort of pastel-y kind of approach. All right, let's open up this pitch folder.
This was what was asked for. So in Query Tracker, it's like, this is the website and these are the requirements. This is what we're asking for. It wasn't a full picture book dummy. It was a few pieces of finished art. We've talked about this particular story a while back. We haven't revisited it in a while, but I just started to send out a few more queries recently just to not let it sit too long.
Yep. By the way, don't mind this black line.
Okay.
That's just, here, I'll show you. If I flatten the image, there it goes.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, don't mind the black lines.
Cool.
Sometimes that appears, and I'm not quite sure why that is. Good type design. That's important.
That's Century, which is what you recommended.
Yeah. It's just a good, timeless, easy to read. You don't have to worry about it. It's got personality, but it doesn't overwhelm the art. Obviously, we talked about this spread. I think this is definitely one of your better spreads, if not your best spread in this whole book.
Okay.
Just for compositionally, it's interesting. And of course, but the technique, there's a real looseness and confidence with your line. Your line is doing a lot of the work, and then the color is just kind of coming in behind it and finishing it off. But it's not, you didn't fill in, you're painting in, which is something that you and I have talked about is like, how can, you don't just, it isn't, I see this a lot, there's the drawing and then illustrators even said this to me, like, oh, I need to fill in this. No, you need to paint whatever it is that you're painting, however it is that you want to paint. And this shows that, where you're being a little less precious with like, I need to like hit every single edge and, doing a little bit, using a little bit of like some color bleeds away from the line. Some color doesn't quite hit the line. And that speaks to a lot of classic watercolorists over the years. Like, again, the Quentin Blakes of the world, but also like the William Steigs, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble and Shrek. You can also look at like Helen Oxenberry, We Went on a Bear Hunt, or Going on a Bear Hunt, whatever that title is called. And like Susan Medaw, who did Martha Speaks. So you look at those folks and you'll get a better sense of like what you can do. Again, range, possibilities with your own drawing and painting. One of the things that you and I have talked about over the weeks and sessions is, draw, don't outline.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of the outlining
Okay.
going on here. I think you could be a little bit more loose. I mean, you're so loose and confident with, you look at that, or look at some of these other drawings that I've highlighted.
Mm-hmm.
It's such energy and personality with your drawing. You got this like blotted ink look that, you know, was so popular in the 60s. Look at, or 70s, look at, you know, early Andy Warhol, look at Ben Shahn, you know, those types of illustrators. You've got this like classic, simpler, see how the broken line, you don't even connect things and it doesn't matter. It totally makes sense. Like Bernard Weber. But when you go to like a finish, it's just feels to me as if you are tightening up.
Yes.
For whatever reason, like, oh, it's a finished illustration. Now I have to abandon all the life that I naturally have in my drawing and come to some sort of, you know, tighter, more polished look. And
I think I'm trying to figure out what makes it finished.
Right. What makes it finished is intention, execution. I know these are going to sound like sort of hokey and airy and non-descriptive, and you know, it's like, oh, okay, I'll just be intentional. But what makes it finished is having an idea and following through entirely with that idea, so that we fully see the story that you're trying to tell, that we understand what we're looking at, all the information is in place. I often see this. I don't normally see this with traditional illustration. I often see it with digital, where it's just like on the, you know, you zoom out and it looks done, but when you zoom in, it just looks like really good concept art. Things like, you know, like where does that hand go? Where is that hand? And just like, again, you have such quality, your quality of line is so much better in your drawing. And then when you go to the painting or whatever, the finished illustration, I mean, is this finished? Sure. Could it be better? Yeah. Could your marks be improved? Could you vary your line weight? Could you be a little bit more impressionistic with your painting? Sure. Because these are things that you've done in your exercises and your reps that you've shown you can do, and the artistry is there. And I think the other way of knowing if something is finished is, this is a hard question to answer, is did I achieve like a certain, you know, publishable level of artistry? Yes or no? And that is one good reason to go to a bookstore or a library and see what has been published, not to see styles or trends, but to see the quality of the artistry, the marks they make, the way they paint. That is helpful.
And this is where I don't send out 100 emails yet, right? This is where I think, okay, it's not ready.
Right. Timing is very individual. A lot, you know, you and a lot of illustrators, you know, obviously me too. Like there's things I want in my career that I'm like, all right, already. Like, how long do I have to wait for this?
Yeah.
But you have to just, again, focus on what you can control, keep iterating, keep creating. Eventually you'll just naturally get better. And at some point you will have a collection, a portfolio body of work that you just feel good about. You individually feel good about. No mentor can tell you like, this is where it's supposed to be. You're the one who gets to decide that ultimately.
Does it ever happen where somebody says, I see potential there? People don't, they don't have time for that, right? But if they like the story and the art's getting there, does that ever happen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I often find though, and again, I'm in this boat, I'm in this camp. If we're being honest, that's not what you want to hear.
Sure.
You want to hear someone look at something that you've done and go, this is great, you're done, here's all the money.
Yeah.
That's just not the way it works.
Okay.
Sorry to say. I wish it would work that way. But if you show it to someone and they go, yeah, I see it. Okay, let's work on these and this and this. You're like, oh, all right. I will. Fine. I mean, look, I've submitted book proposals to editors and I'll get, you know, they'll come back and be like, yeah, it's, you know, not for me. And I don't want to hear that. I just want to hear them go, this is exactly what I want, exactly how it's put it together, push the button, hit print, here's the money, you're done.
Yeah.
So again, what can we do about that? We can focus on what we can control, increase the artistry of the way we work, come up with a consistent in terms of quality and range, portfolio or books or whatever, and go from there.
Awesome.
Yeah. This is a good drawing. And
Thank
so
you.
are these, the ones that I just wanted to point out really quickly. This one, obviously.
Thank you.
The painting here is interesting. Like there's a lot of really pretty like color variations and temperature changes going on up in this face. And I don't know if you wanted to continue pushing this or just exploring this, but that one works. And then just, as I've done in the past, the ones that I'm dotting here are the ones that have the most personality, the most character, body language. These characters, especially like your more simpler style, just feels, I'm just looking at that going like, oh man, make some really good board books, or who are these characters? Like this is such a good, these are all this collection here. Yeah, it's a great character. Might be their best drawing in the whole bit. This is like your version of Marge Simpson a little bit right here. Yeah. I have an assignment for you.
Okay.
The assignment is, and all like, if you have something specific that you want to work on right now, obviously I defer to that, do that. But if you don't, let's maybe take something you've already done that you would consider finished and redo it.
Okay.
Based on everything that you and I have been talking about over the past handful of sessions.
Okay.
An illustration or a spread that you recently decided, a handful of months ago, looked at and said, this is finished. Look at it again. Do it again.
Yeah.
And let's see what it looks like.
Giuseppe, You've been so generous with your time and allowing me to interview you today. Thank you. This has been wonderful. I think we have one more call in mentorship call, right?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
Yep. Yeah, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And this is cool, man. Thanks for doing this. Obviously, keep doing what you're doing with this channel, with your work. And again, it's when you think about the possibilities and where this could go in the future, we don't quite know, but it's interesting and fun to think about. And you won't know unless you do it, and you're doing it. So
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. See you next time.
So for people who don't know, my crazy claim to fame is I kind of do a poor man's Photoshop. It is a layers of drawings that I cut out and glue onto boards and then scan or photograph in, and that becomes the page. So instead of just doing a single drawing for everything or using Photoshop to replicate stuff, I hand drew layers and layers and layers for every page in a year while working a full-time job.